have you looked at the standings? It's early, right? We're a few weeks into the season.
Yeah, let's not like
right.
five
we're
games
not,
in think that the Bulls are going undefeated and Charlotte's going to the finals. Let's not get crazy. Okay?
Well, speaking of those two teams, though, I'm with you. But right now, let's just stay in the moment. Chicago 4-0, Charlotte 4-1, New York, Miami, Washington, Atlanta 3-1. The Bucks are in the 7th seed. The Nets are like 10th. It's early, but I'm just saying. And then we go to the West. Now, Golden State, Rob, I actually think Golden State's for real. I mean, they need Clay back to really like be a contender, but they're playing well without him. They're 4-0. But you got Minnesota 3-1, Sacramento 2-2, and you got the Lakers obviously at 2-3. So here's the point I want to make, Rob. Again, very early, but let's just play along for the sake of conversation.
All right, I'm playing along.
Would you, if this continued and we start seeing new young teams that are, near the top of the standings, do you think, let's say over the next decade or so, would it be better for the NBA if Milwaukee went on a tear and became the next dynasty and won, say, 4 of the next 6 championships?
Oh, that's a lot.
Okay, we'll say 3 of the next 5. So they would have had 4 of the last 6. But they become a dynasty. We're dreaming. So hypothetically, they become a dynasty, and Giannis obviously becomes LeBron Jordan-like status, right? If he's winning like that and putting up the huge numbers he is. Or would it be better if we did have an era of parity, where one year it might be Chicago, the next year it's, now we're dreaming, I'm really dreaming, New York. The next year it's Brooklyn. The next year it's somebody, like
since
Utah.
You're in a fantasy
like
land, say Detroit. Go ahead.
Yeah, Detroit, right. Yeah. Cade Cunningham just leads them to the promised land. But you know what I'm saying, Rob? Like a decade of parity. Which would you rather see, and which do you think would be better for the league?
I know you're going to use the example of the 70s and when they had all. I already know, Chris. I know what your thinking is. Like, we've been doing the show together. No, you're not. Because there were a lot of things wrong with the league, and it wasn't just parity. It was drug use and people not connecting to the players and feeling
that too.
No, I mean, that was part of it when it became a league that had the championship on tape delay. But I get your point. And some dynasties are good. You don't want it to always be a dynasty-laden league where teams always win. The Yankees went to the World Series 8 out of 10 times in the 50s. The attendance at Yankee Stadium went down because people were like, it became passé. Go look at the Celtics, Chris, when they were winning. You think they were selling out every night? No, they weren't.
Back in the 60s?
Yeah, they weren't. I mean, it became like, okay, I saw them win last year. And I was at the game a year before when they won.
Right.
And it does, after a while, wear on you a little bit. So I think like some fresh blood, especially after the LeBron era of super teams and, 95% of the league not having a chance, it would be good for the NBA to have some of these kids. Now, I'm not talking about a different champ every year. Maybe a team wins back-to-back and then somebody wins the next year. But to mix it up, like Knicks fans haven't had a championship since 1973, like some of these other franchises that would be great for them to finally, taste the Bulls haven't won since Michael Jordan left. Like, those would be cool. It would be different to spread it around. The Clippers finally win a championship. I don't think that would be bad for the league as long as you still had some great teams, great players. And so it wouldn't be like every year with somebody else and people would fall off, but you'd have teams that it would be amazing if they won. I always go back and I have a fondness for the 2004 Pistons, mostly because, Chris, I covered almost every game that year. You know what it is if you're a beat person. I was a columnist in Detroit. I went to every single game at home and a lot of the road games, and I saw that team, and I remember what it was like because they weren't supposed to win. Even with the Lakers, with the two old guys, right, Chris, to go along with Shaq and Kobe and Karl Malone and Gary Payton, they still weren't supposed to win. Shaq and Kobe, without those two guys, won 3 in a row, the year previous to 2004. Right. So they didn't need them. They could have won. Everybody still thought they were going to win. And when the Pistons won, it was a neat story. It was pretty cool. It was something like, wow, like this team without any stars won. Cool. Well, the rest of the NBA America, don't be trying to diss. Why are you always hating on the 2004 Pistons?
I'm not. I think it was a great accomplishment.
All right. Anyway,
my point. I covered that series. Yeah. I mean, I didn't have pom-poms like you, but I
didn't have pom-poms. Man, you talk to the people who read the paper in Detroit, they always said I hated everything in Detroit. It's always funny. You're like, I'm waving pom-poms, and I'm the one they used to hate in Detroit because I would tell it like it is. You know that. You read my columns in Detroit. I was a crusher.
I never missed your column.
Yeah, well.
No, I did read your stuff. It was good stuff. All right, I hear you, and you made some good points. There's no doubt that it would be very interesting if you had like 10 teams that could win the championship, right? If Atlanta and with Trae Young and Chicago with this group they've put together, and Denver and Utah and Phoenix, like go on and on. If these teams really had a legitimate chance to win the championship, you had no idea when the playoffs started who was going to win it. That would be exciting. But when I say like what I'm thinking, and this may never happen. I mean, this is why he's the GOAT. But if Giannis, Rob, became, I mean, remember the best era for the league is in terms of popularity was the Jordan era, right? Yep. And he was dominant. 6 championships in 8 years. The 2 years he didn't win it, he played baseball, came back late, wasn't himself when he came back from baseball. If Giannis created that type of dynasty, which I don't think he will, but I do think that would be great for the league. People would latch on to Giannis. Obviously, he's got a great personality. He's very likable. His game is unique. I think that probably, Rob, would be the best thing for the league in terms of popularity. But I hear you in the competitiveness. Now, you said you know where I'm going, and you were right. Here's what I was going to say, though. In the 70s, yeah, because the fans, they may not know this. You know it.
Right.
In the 70s, you had 8 teams win championships, Rob. That's incredible.
That was like the Seattle Supersonics, Chris. They won one, right?
They won it in 79. Washington in 78. Portland in 77. I believe it was Boston in 76. Rob G. watch this. I'm doing this from memory. You go check it out. Make sure I'm right. 75 was Golden State. 74 was Boston. 73 was New York. 72 was the Lakers. 71 was the Bucks, and 70 was the Knicks. So, but yet, Rob, as you said, that decade was the least popular decade in NBA history.
Right.
And you mentioned there was rampant, at least reportedly, right? It was a rampant drug use.
Right.
The league became overwhelmingly black, which at that time was an issue with fans and things like that. And on top of that, Rob, remember, at least for the first half of the 70s, half of the best players in the world were in the ABA.
Yep, that's true.
Right? Because I think when the ABA, when they had the merger and Dr. J joined the NBA, right. I think now the games were still on tape delay, but that gave the league a boost. You know what I mean?
It did. And I remember, Chris, listening. I don't know, you're a little younger than me, but Howard Cosell had a radio commentary every night on the radio growing up in New York. It was a national on
I must have been
radio.
Cool because I don't remember that.
Yeah, you know it's called Howard Cosell Speaking of Sports. Hello again, everyone. It's Howard Cosell Speaking of Sports. And I remember listening, Chris, one day where the league was in flux. They didn't know what they were going to do. And Howard actually reported that there's a chance that 5 or 6 teams were going to break away from the rest of the NBA and form its own league. This was in the 70s.
What?
That's how bad. Yep, it was like the Knicks,
Boston. The ABA was already there.
Yeah, it was like a breakaway from the NBA because the league, and then they wound up having to merge or whatever. But it was in the 70s. Wow. And I remember listening to that because the league was in trouble back then. It was.
Oh, yeah, it was definitely in trouble.
And the Phoenix Suns are the ones who had the big drug thing, wasn't it? Was that in the 80s or whatever? When was that? That wasn't. Yeah, they had. But anyway, the league was not that popular.
Do you remember the Sports Illustrated cover with Dr. J and Dave Cowens on the cover?
I don't remember. Was that the
merger?
Was
because the merger, yeah.
Right.
Boston had won the NBA championship, and the Nets had won the NBA.
New York Nets, right?
Or
the
ABA,
New York
won
Nets.
ABA. Right. So